So I've just finished reading Babel-17 by Samuel R. Delany, published in 1966. And this is a science fiction novel that I've been a bit intimidated by because it's generally referred to with a sense of reverence or a kind of general confusion. So I didn't really know what to expect going in. And I was surprised to find that this is actually kind of a swashbuckling space opera, albeit kind of wrapped up in something that's a bit more profound and, more importantly, quite strange. So it's set in a world where a segment of humanity are at war with a conflicting group who are known as the invaders, and there have been a series of accidents that are taking place conveniently at the sites of important infrastructure of what's known as the Alliance, this segment of humanity. And the military investigate this, and they find at each one of these accident sites a signal which is picked up kind of before, during, and after these events. And within that signal, they find what they believe to be a code. And so they attempt to decipher it, and they're having trouble. So they go to our main character, who is called Ridra Wong, or Rydra Wong. I'm going to say Ridra, I think it sounds a bit better in my mind. And she is a language expert, a retired translator, who is now working as a really famous and highly regarded poet. She's a really fascinating character because she has such a deep knowledge of language and communication that she has this almost superhuman ability to determine what someone is thinking or what they're about to say. And she does this through someone's kind of choice of words, their body language, and muscular movements, that sort of thing. And by the language that they know. And this is all kind of based on a real hypothesis known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which proposes that your understanding of language determines how you perceive the world and even conceive of ideas. There are real-world examples of this, which Delany does scatter throughout the book, but he also does some really interesting examples from a science fiction skew where he's talking about both alien languages but also human languages which have developed through humanity evolving on entirely different planets. So she pretty quickly deduces that this code that the military have given to her, it is not actually a code, it's a language, it's a dialogue between two entities, and she sets about trying to decipher it. But she only has a printout of the transcript of this dialogue, and she requests to get the audio recordings, which the military, being the military, are reluctant to provide to her. So she decides that she's going to assemble a crew and take a spaceship to the location of the next accident, which she deduces through her knowledge of language and her very basic, at that point, understanding of this language, which is referred to as Babel-17. So the crew that she assembles is filled with really bizarre individuals. For example, you've got a character known as Brass, who is her navigator, I believe, and he has undergone really drastic cosmetic surgery to effectively present as a lion man. He has this big golden mane, he has claws, and he has a tail. And then you've also got some crew members who are referred to as discorporates, who are technically dead, and they're more like kind of ghostly entities. And while all of this is really weird, for most of the novel, I'm thinking, this isn't overly confusing or difficult, but there comes a point where Ridra starts to understand Babel-17, and like that hypothesis says, it starts to shape the way that she is seeing the world, and it influences her narration and the vocabulary that she chooses, and even the sentence structure. There is a point where the writing becomes very experimental. There's one chapter in particular which kind of borders on being incomprehensible. And I think that makes sense in context, because we as the reader don't really have the same linguistic understanding of this language, and also the kind of deeper knowledge that Ridra has. I think the closest thing that I could compare it to, really, and this might be a little bit of recency bias because I read it in the last few weeks, is Norstrilia by Cordwainer Smith, mostly in terms of that strangeness. Also, I would refer to Blindsight by Peter Watts in terms of this crew full of weird individuals. And then probably A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg as well, in terms of that exploration of language within a science fiction setting. And also, actually, some of the tone, some of the experimental nature, my mind was kind of drawn to The Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester too. So overall, I think the word masterpiece, masterwork, grandmaster, these terms are thrown around a lot in this genre, and I think it isn't always applicable, but for Babel-17, I do think it is. It manages to achieve something that is really unique, really thought-provoking, really strange and experimental, while still being entertaining and expertly written. Despite these kind of meditations on this language hypothesis, there are space battles, there are action sequences, there's espionage, there are zero-gravity wrestling matches, there's this body modification that almost puts you in a cyberpunk mindset, and I really loved it. I know that this book can really split opinions, so let me know what you thought of it if you have read it in the comments. And once again, thanks for liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.